Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I see a lot of familiar faces from last week, so I apologize. It's virtually the same presentation. Next time you can get up and give it for me. Okay. So Jim touched on a couple of really big reasons of why the district wants to go solar. One is to lock in energy prices over the next 25 years and save the district money. When you cut your spending out of your utility costs, that actually frees up general fund money, and you can spend that in the classroom. So that's an added benefit. Jim also mentioned the environmental impact of the district. If we can reduce the amount of energy that you're getting from PG&E, MCE, and generate it on-site cleanly, you can reduce the environmental impact of the district. And third, having these solar systems on the campuses gives the students a direct learning opportunity to learn about renewable energy and bring that into the classroom and create curriculum opportunities. So the whole project overview, the district, as Jim mentioned, was interested in going solar. They had done a couple of previous looks at it, and they contacted our company, Sage Renewables, to help them walk through finding out, does it pencil? Does it make sense to go solar? Can we go solar? So we did a feasibility study, and based on the results of that, the board decided to go forward with issuing an RFP, a request for proposals, to get proposals in from qualified solar vendors to build the project and also to tell us how much it's going to cost. And so one of the things we'll do with that is we've been managing the whole RFP process, and my company will analyze the proposals as they come in and figure out what the savings will be for the district and evaluate the proposals on other terms, such as the quality of the products that they're using and their designs and the financial stability of the company that's offering the project to us. A lot of factors we take into consideration. So after that, once the district decides who they would like to go with, if they get a proposal that works in the district's favor and meets the goals of the district, they'll enter into contract negotiations, then they'll go into design and permitting, and then construction, commissioning, and then you'll be generating clean energy and getting the utility savings that we were looking for. One thing to mention is right now we're just in the RFP stage of the process. So we put together a packet that went out to qualified solar firms, and we had to give them some parameters of where they could and couldn't put the solar arrays. And I'll talk about some of the design considerations a little later on. But we're still in the early process, so I want to make it really clear that's one of the reasons that we're having these meetings, community meetings, reaching out, trying to get feedback from you, because none of this is set in stone. We still have a long time before the designs are actually complete and they go to construction. So if there's any issues with where certain arrays are located, it's okay. We still have time, and we want to hear from you guys. So. Like I said, we did a feasibility study. We looked at all the district-owned sites and found out that the best 12 sites were the actual school sites for the first phase of solar. Those could physically handle interconnecting a solar system that's sized to offset the bill at that site. And that's what we were looking at. And then we ran it through what we thought would be the pricing that you would get for systems of these size, and did estimates using very conservative assumptions going forward, and showed that we likely will have a proposal that comes in that saves the district quite a bit of money over the next 25 years. We looked at 3 different financing schemes in the feasibility study. We did a GO bond or a general obligation bond or cash financing, power purchase agreement, which is third-party owned and operated project where they own the systems, sell the electricity off of them for a set term, and then also, and at the end of that term, the district can buy out the project and own it and operate it. And then we also looked at clean renewable energy bonds, which is a federal financing program, very low interest loans essentially. And I just explained the 3 types of financing scenarios, and that's what we were looking at. Right now, the district doesn't have general obligation bond money available for this project, and they unfortunately don't have cash on hand either. So the 2 viable options that we're looking at are the power purchase agreement and clean renewable energy bonds. The findings of the feasibility study showed that we had 12 school sites that could physically handle interconnection of solar systems sized to offset their bills. It comes in at around 1.5 megawatts DC total. You would be offsetting 82% of your annual energy consumption, and with that you get a utility bill credit of 98% of what you pay. And that's due to the time of use energy metering, where solar is producing energy during the middle of the day when the electricity that you're actually buying is much more expensive at that time than it is in the evening. So now that we're using energy right now, this electricity is cheaper at night than it is during the middle of the day, and we're getting credited that higher cost of energy. So you can actually offset more of a portion of your bill with lower consumption. And the carbon offset, we would be offsetting 500 tons a year, and I forget how many cars that equates to, but I can tell you if anybody wants to email me that. We're looking at a total installed cost of around $5 million, a little over there, if we were to purchase it outright. Across the board, we found that the PPA was going to save the district more money and has a higher net present value than the CREPS finance project, with the exception of the year 1 savings. And over the entire 25-year, we have a $4.8 million PPA net present value for the project, which is pretty good. And again, that's just the feasibility study. We don't know what we're going to get when we get the proposals in, but they're scheduled to come in a week from today, and I'm very excited to see what comes in. So our RFP process is where we go out for the proposals. I already touched on this a little bit, but we're running the project under 4217 government code carve-out that allows the district to enter into energy services contracts without taking the lowest bid. So it's very convenient for us and beneficial for the district because we can evaluate the proposals that we get in based on all factors of the proposal. Like I mentioned before, the components that are used, the designs, the overall savings of the project, all of those are taken into consideration. And we've already gone through the process of trying to figure out the best spots to locate the arrays on each school site. We reached out to a lot of the administrators and staff at the district to try and get feedback, and now we're holding the community meetings to get input from the community as well. So here's an overview of the timeline. Like I said, the proposals are due a week from today on the 26th, and we will be reviewing them on the 29th and possibly holding interviews with the top-ranked firms. we will go to the board on the 2nd of February with a recommendation of what firm to enter into contract negotiations with, if there is a firm that puts a proposal together that is advantageous to the district. And hopefully entering into contract on the 15th of March. And then that's when the design period starts right there. And design period takes about 3 months. We would expect to begin construction this summer in June, around mid-June. Have most heavy construction done during the summer. After school gets back in, there's still going to be wiring to do, light construction, but they'll have come in and drilled all the rigs, or drilled all the foundations and done the heavy lifting during the summer. And then final completion up and running by December, end of the year. So the two types of installations that we're looking at are shade structures and ground mount. None of the schools that are here tonight have ground mount possibility. It was only at one school, Pleasant Valley. So all the schools that we're talking about tonight are just shade structures, either over parking areas or interior on the campus, which would just provide shade and generate electricity. I should mention we require that the proposers use DSA pre-checked shade structures. It allows them to get through the permitting process a lot quicker, and it also, we know that DSA has already qualified these mounting systems, so there's no question on whether or not they're safe and applicable for the schools. So some of the things that we have to take into consideration when trying to figure out where these arrays go. These are really large, permanent structures that are going to be on the campus for 25 years and longer. They're warranted that long, and we've seen them be around and working 40 years. They have to be 20 feet away from any existing buildings. We want to keep them out of any of the emergency vehicle access lanes. We require a minimum of 12-foot clearance from the bottom of the array to the ground. That will, alleviate most possibility of vehicle strikes with an array anywhere where you can drive vehicles. We need to locate them away from any trees or buildings or anything that might cause shade on the panels or drop debris on them. We want to keep the panels clean and get the most sunlight as possible. So we want them oriented south if possible, definitely not north. And most of these carport shade structures are a 5 to 10 degree tilt. So you can imagine that at a 10-degree tilt with a minimum clearance of 12 degrees or 12 feet, the highest point on that structure, because it's 40 feet wide, is going to be 18 feet in the air. And we also want to have access for drill rigs to get in there. So here are just some examples of shade structures that are installed at other schools. This is out in Pittsburgh. And what we've found is when we put these things in on school sites, the students congregate under them and they offer shade, which a lot of times we don't have, and they end up being quite popular. Here's another one. This is in Forestville. This is El Molino High School. It's got a shade structure next to the basketball courts, and in the background you can see there's some ground-mounted structures as well. This is down in San Jose, and this is an interior shade structure over a eating area. And this, by the way, this is what we've spec'd in the project, is for the interior shade structures not to have big concrete foundations on them, but I'll show you in just a second. The parking lot foundations do have concrete bollards on the actual foundation, and that's to protect them in case a car strikes them. Like I was mentioning, these are the parking carports, and you can see the concrete bollards. Other examples of parking shade structures, and you can see these are pretty big structures. They're very high in the ground, off of the ground, and all of the parking shade structures will be installed with lighting underneath, and it's all Title 24 compliant, LED lighting, very energy efficient, and does not have any spillover, so it just shines down, and it has motion sensors on it which have 2 different levels of dimming. It's actually, most instances we find that it actually improves the lighting of the parking lots. And before we break up in a moment, we'll put the layouts out, the current layouts that are in the RFP out. And so if anybody has any specific questions about a specific school, we can address them, and we encourage you to fill out the comment cards. We're going to try to respond to those directly, and also hopefully post responses of general issues or anything like that on the district's solar webpage. So before we break up and look at the individual school layouts, just an example of what we have in the RFP, and to give you an overview, these blue squares are all options of where they can place the arrays. And again, these are approximately 40 feet wide, and then going on the short axis, and then they vary in length, and they can be 150 feet, 200 feet long. At this school, at San Jose Middle School, we gave the proposals lots of options of where they could place the arrays. And this is how we have to give them some parameters to put their proposals together to give us cost estimates on. Not all schools will have this many options. And also, just a note, for San Jose Middle School, they only need pretty much the size of C2 to that one that's down by the track. They could offset the entire bill of the school with just that one option. So we gave them more options just so they could use their competitive advantages and design it the way they want to. But really, at each school, we've given them a target production amount and said, this is how much energy we need you to produce. You take these options and put together the best proposal that will hit that energy production target. The other thing I wanted to mention is we have preliminary conduit runs, and the arrays have to be interconnected to the main electrical switchgear at each site. We've just shown them on here for just to visualize them, but the proposers will actually come up with the final home runs that go back to the interconnection site, and most likely they will directionally bore those, which means they don't have to trench all the way across your campus. It'll just cut a hole about the size of one of these tables and then shoot the conduit and all the way underground to where they're going. It's very, it doesn't destroy the campus. So that's the overview, and now we can set the individual sites out. Does anybody have any general questions before we talk about or show the specific sites? Yeah.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about we put the RFP out, but they could be bidded 2 ways. One was if they bid on every school site, but then the other way was...
Sure. Yeah, so part of what we did with the RFP was we put the entire portfolio out, all 12 sites, and said, give us a proposal that includes all of it. And with that, we said, give us a proposal for if we're gonna pay for it, own it, and operate it, and just buy it, you guys put it in. Also give us a proposal for if you guys are gonna own it and do a third-party power purchase agreement. So there's multiple levels of proposals that we're getting with when we get a proposal in. And then like Jim mentioned, we've also asked them, the solar vendors, to do a value engineering proposal where they choose the best sites, the most cost effective, to give the district the most savings in the end. So they might come through and say, you know what, San Ramon is really, it's too hard to interconnect there, or we don't have good siting, or it's a really long home run, so it's going to be more expensive to build. So that's what we've asked them to do, is tell us what is the most financially efficient collection of sites.
So I just want people to know that, and so that there might not be solar at every single site, you know, especially to start with. Maybe we'll pick the most efficient, you know, 5 or 6 or 7 sites, go with those first, and then maybe later on, you know, do a second phase where we add the site. So there is a possibility that not every single school will have solar. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear.
Yes?
What happens with all the energy produced during the summer when the schools are virtually?
Great question. So there is, when you're producing energy and not using it directly on site, we're currently able to do what is called net energy metering, where you feed the energy back into the grid and you get credited at the retail rate that you're putting it into the grid. I mentioned that earlier with the fact that we're generating electricity during the peak hours of the day when electricity is more expensive, and then we're using energy right now when it's a little less expensive, and that way it's much more efficient to offset your bill with PV generated during the middle of the day. But yes, it's net energy metering, and there's a 12-month true-up where you generate all throughout the year, you consume all throughout the year, and at the end of the year, PG&E, MCE looks at your bill and does a net calculation and tells you you owe this much or they owe you a certain amount.
Is that based on law, or is it just a policy of PG&E?
It's policy right now, and it is currently being deliberated at the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission. They're holding an open meeting tomorrow on the 20th, and then they're supposed to have a ruling on how they're going to move forward with net energy metering after the utilities caps are met, which when they created net energy metering, they set a 5% cap for each utility. PG&E is gonna hit that cap this summer. So based on the timeline of our project, we may be able to get it in under that net energy metering 1.0, where it grandfathers us in for 20 years, or it may go in under 2.0, but right now the good news is that the CPUC's proposed decision along those lines is very consumer friendly. Yes?
How durable are the actual arrays if a rock gets chucked up in the air or a baseball hit into it or whatever and
Yeah.
can be busted or?
Hopefully not, but they are very durable. They're rated for golf ball size hail, and I've seen them hit by baseballs and whatnot, and not have an issue with the panels being broken. But they can be broken. I've seen rocks chucked on them. And saw a golf ball once that actually did break a panel. But they're very robust, and in that case, just to let you know what happens, if the district is owning and operating the systems, the district carries insurance on these things. So the insurance would cover replacing that panel. But generally, we try and keep them out of areas that are going to be susceptible to strikes like that. There's only so much you can do against vandalism, but hope that it won't happen. Yes?
So this was it 98% number that you were putting out, this is a district-wide
Correct.
number? So like, if there's 6 schools have this thing, it's gonna feed the whole district bill? Is it, or offset the whole district bill, or it's offsetting the individual school bill?
It's both, actually, because the way that we came up with the target production number, we modeled it based on what we would expect generation to be and what the future consumption at the site will be, taking into account energy efficiency measures that are planned to go in for Prop 39. And so we sized the systems directly to offset about 98 to 100% of your bill the first year. And over time, that's going to go down a little bit. And we also don't know exactly what's going to happen with energy rates. But each site with the target production was based on about 98% of the bill offset
Of
at
the
that
site
site.
there, so like you couldn't just load up San Jose Middle School with panels and fix the whole district?
That would be great.
Super sunny there.
Technically, yeah. And we did look at that option because there is the parcel over in Hamilton. But the problem with that, the way that the rules work on transferring energy from one site to the next, you can only transfer the generation portion of your bill and not the transmission and distribution portion of your bill, which is roughly half of your bill. So it's not financially efficient to try and do it that way. You can offset much more of your bill if you interconnect on site to that meter. But great question. Any other questions?
Quick one,
Yeah.
this is probably a dumb question. Is there any noise?
It's not a dumb question. On these systems that we've specified, we're telling the solar vendors to use string inverters, which are smaller inverters that are actually mounted on the structure themselves. They're not the large central inverters that you might have seen elsewhere at other projects. Inverters do have a hum, a high-pitched hum, and the central inverters are much louder than the string inverters. And one of the reasons that we really like string inverters is, A, they're much less loud. They're hardly noticeable, but they do have a small hum when they're fully loaded up and working. It's actually more of a high-pitched, annoying sound. And one of the reasons we really like having string inverters, they're mounted on the structures, which ideally are further away from the school than in the old days, 5 years ago, before string inverters were common. They would set the inverter kind of close to the service panel, and we saw schools that we were not involved in the design with that had set the inverters right next to classrooms, and it was a bad idea. But great question. These don't make a lot of noise, but there's a small amount.
And then I'm looking at that one, and all of those would be shade, that none of those would be ground mounted, even though some of them are in areas where you could potentially do ground. Now, I remember hearing that there was a reasoning for staying away from ground and just always doing shade regardless of where it is.
Well, shade allows a multi-use of the site. When
Right.
you do a ground mount system, you have to fence in the system 8-foot-high fences with signs all over it saying no access to staff or students. It takes that, and you need a much bigger footprint.
Right.
So it takes a larger chunk of area out of use for the school, whereas if it's a shade structure, you can still use the area underneath the structure, and it doesn't. It also goes back to the vandalism issue too. It's very common for ground mounts to get vandalized. Much less common for arrays that are 15 feet in the air to get vandalized.
That brings up one last question, and I think I already know the answer to this, but just to make sure everybody knows. Why are we not looking at putting these on roofs?
Another great question, and that comes down to timing and DSA. you have to go through the Division of State Architecture for any projects that you have on schools. Going through DSA and trying to put them on roofs, there's a number of issues with that. That adds a lot of timing to several months to the permitting process. It adds costs. And then you also have the lifetime of the roof and the structure. Those are uncertainties that would definitely increase the cost of the project. So as with regards to try and get this project put in close to the net energy metering cap and getting it in this year, we decided just to stay off roofs and make the whole process a little more streamlined. Yes?
I'm not sure it's a question that you can answer, but at Hamilton, we have the gym that's used by the city as well as the school. Is there any interest from the city to help offset some of this cost? If some of the structures, the panels were installed at the Hamilton site?
I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that either, so we could maybe look into that.
I mean,
Yeah.
that might be a possibility if we went the Krebs option, because it's not paying for it. The PPA would be tough because it's our meter bill, right?
Right, and that's my understanding is that the district pays the electricity there. So currently the city doesn't pay the electricity, so that, yeah. Any other questions before we look at individual sites? Yeah.
You know, he sort of, Greg went to the roof question, but the expectation for these things is carports, and before you mentioned that they're really not like weatherproofing.
That's
We
right.
also talked about the amount of light that comes off them at night, so maybe cover that as part of it.
Sure. That's a great point. Forgot to mention, these things aren't completely watertight. So if you park under them and it rains, your car's still gonna get wet. They're not like a fully closed off roof. There are little gaps between the panels. And then I think you mentioned just the light
The
coming
light,
out from
yeah,
them at night.
they're lit underneath at night.
Yeah, and they'll be on the same controls of the school's lighting controls. So when the school's lighting is on, these systems will be on. And like I said before, they'll be on a dimmer setting. And then when a car or a person walks under them, they'll come up to a higher level light. And we make the solar vendors do full-on photometric studies of the parking lot when they're putting these things in, so that they're adequately lighting to the International Illumination Engineer Society standards, which govern the parking lot lighting rules. Mouthful. Yes.
The cleaning and maintaining of the panels, who would that fall under?
So it depends on what financing structure we go with. If we determine that a Krebs bond funded project is going to be more advantageous and the district decides to go for that and buy the systems outright, own and operate them, then it's the district's responsibility to clean them, maintain them, and it's a good point. Solar systems do need maintenance. They need active maintenance every year. And so in that case, what districts typically do, they'll contract with a third-party vendor that offers operations and maintenance services. And so you'll contract with somebody that will come out every 6 months or so, check on the system, make sure everything is working properly, and they'll clean it usually once, maybe twice a year. It just depends on how you set up the contract. And districts typically will pay for those contracts out of the savings that they're realizing from the offset solar, the energy costs. In the case that the district goes with power purchase agreement, the owner of the system who's selling the electricity to the district is fully responsible for the operations and maintenance. So the district wouldn't have to maintain it or do anything other than purchase the energy that comes off of the system. And as you can imagine, it's in the owner's best interest to have those systems operating as efficiently and as best as they possibly can, because they're selling you the energy off of it. So that they're incentivized to take care of it under those circumstances.
In that same vein, I think I heard you say the solar panels are good for 25 years. Is that true of the inverters as well?
No, typically not. Some of the inverters are coming out with 25-year warranties now. You can get extended warranties. In reality, they're going to burn out, and you will have to replace them. The lifetime of the inverters is getting better. It's increasing. We used to see it much shorter. Typically in our modeling, we modeled that you're going to have to replace inverters every 12 years or so.